Yeah, so for those who didn't hear what Francois said is you go to a website that's an attacker site, you think it's somewhere legitimate, but when you enter your data, it's going to go to the attacker and not to the actual site. Yes, Julian, you had your hand. Yeah, that's not phishing. So that, there isn't really a nice word for that. That's just being a nasty friend. Yeah, for those who didn't hear what he said is if someone logs into your computer and logs into Facebook, leaves it on, you can get the person's password that way. For those who don't know how, I can show you how at lunch or sometime. Not that you should ever do that. But yeah, so that isn't phishing because phishing has a fairly strict definition of duplicating a legitimate website, making it look legitimate, and having people enter into this site they think is legitimate, but is not. So that wouldn't be phishing. I don't know a nice word for that. Yes, fellow.
What was the name of the...
So the IP comes from the name server. Yeah.
The DNS?
Yeah, so the domain name server or DNS.
I also...
You sure you haven't taken this course before? You sure you haven't taken this course before? Yeah. What Velo said is there have been cases in which people have hacked a domain name server. And so they've said someone wants to go to Google. And that server returns, instead of Google's IP, the IP for an attacker's website. That is something that does happen, and domain name servers are the holy grail of targets for malicious attackers because they can essentially change any website they want by just duplicating it on their own server and sending users there. So yeah, attacking and altering DNS, domain name servers, is a very big problem in internet security. It doesn't fall under the umbrella of phishing because phishing generally is HTML that reaches the end user, but it certainly is a type of exploit. Edwin? Pardon? From DNS or from phishing? There's not an easy way for an end user to protect himself. What you can do is, some people have programs installed where if they get an IP that's in the wrong area of the world, right? If you try to access google.ca, it sends you to a server in Russia, something's probably up. And a lot of network switches also check for that. It's mostly software that you run in the background that checks your IP connections and says, hey, something's wrong here. It's very, very difficult for the end user to actually go on and manually check. The majority of the security there is in making sure that the domain name servers themselves are secure in the first place. Any other questions? Yes. Okay. So, what I will get you all to do is head on over to Facebook. Oh, you can't see that. There we go. Right? And if you are logged in, open up an incognito window. That's Control-Shift-N when in Chrome. And then it won't be logged in. So you want to see this login page right here. Right? Okay, most of us aren't at that point yet. So what we're going to do is right-click on the page, click View Source. These instructions are all also in the PowerPoint. And we're going to see all of this ugly HTML. This is very badly written HTML, right? No line breaks, no formatting. So it's a little bit more difficult for us to edit it, but we can do that. We're going to Control-C, all text. So Control-A selects all. It's a bit easier. And you can Control-C or right-click copy. And we're going to create a file on our desktop. My desktop is thoroughly full right now, so I'll use a different folder. Right, so we're going to create, actually a better way of doing that is opening Notepad. So to open Notepad, you might see it right here. You might have to click the Run dialog. And in the Run dialog, you can then just type Notepad or notepad.exe. You're going to paste the code into there. You're going to save it to the desktop or somewhere you'll remember. Make sure it's all files. And then enter, say, fb.html. Right, so you want to create an HTML file somewhere we'll remember with the Facebook code. It might complain about encoding, that's okay. Right, we can go ahead and open that HTML file once we've made it.
Why are we using the incognito one?
Pardon?
Why are we using the incognito one?
Oh, so I'm doing that just because if I didn't do that, it would show the logged in account. right? So we want the login screen, right? So I'm going to open this, and what we see is the login screen. This character shows up because we didn't bother with the character encodings. That's something we could easily fix ourselves, but we don't need to. Is everyone at that point? So we're going to go back to our notepad file, right? You guys should have the PowerPoint presentation open. So you'll see this code that we're going to be copying. So you can just copy and paste it. You can also type it in. We're going to search for the form tag. So we can go ahead, go right to the top, Control F to find, and we're going to find form. And we see this form tag. That's the form that has those text boxes that we enter the username and password into. We'll see this action equals. So right now it says action equals https://facebook.com/login.php. That's the file that normally logs you in. We're going to go ahead and change that to this URL right here. So that's billy.scienceffortheweb.net/gen/fbspoof.php. So paste that right in, make sure you keep the quotation marks. Next thing we're going to do is, if we look down a little bit, I'm going to turn word wrap on and find form again. So you see where we have one of these inputs, right? So we see this input type equals hidden. Somewhere within that input, so like between the form tag and the input tag, we're going to go ahead and enter this tag we have here. So it's input type equals hidden, name equals pname, value equals your name. Replace that with your actual name. That's just so we can keep track of the responses once we get them. Right, so we have the end of the form tag here and this input. I'm just going to stick that other input right there.
Every action?
Pardon?
Did you replace each and every action in the form?
No, just the first one.
Just the first one?
Yeah. Yeah, so you don't have to replace every action URL, just the first one. Yes. So the second part, that input tag can go anywhere in between the form and the /form tags. And that part, you don't actually have to do that part. It just makes it easier to figure out whose request came from who. We'll see in a second. So a good question is, why do we add that extra input type equals hidden tag? The reason we do that is because we'll all be sending this data to the same server. So we're just adding our name to it so the server can track whose request came from whom. So that part is optional. You don't need to do it, but it makes it easier to figure stuff out once we're all done. Okay, so the name or the name input, again, that tells the server we're going to send it to which requests came from which student. So it makes it easier for us to sort it out when we get it in a little bit. It's not necessary, so that part makes it easier, but you don't have to do that if it's too difficult to find where to put it. Okay, so I think most of us are at this point, so we'll move on. Just put your hand up if you still need help, and the counselors will come around and help you out. So what we're going to do now is just save that, right? So you can do File Save or Control Save, or sorry, Control S. It'll complain about the character encoding again. Just click OK for that. If you guys have changed the form action attribute, the name isn't that important, so you can leave that out and go along with the rest of the class. Okay? So we've saved that. Now what we're going to do is take a look at it on wherever we've saved it, so in the desktop in this case. Actually, I've already got it open. Right, so we have this file open. We can reload it. It looks the exact same. The difference is, when we go ahead and submit this form, or to click login, that's going to go to our server instead of Facebook, right? So enter not your real login information. That is very important, right? So enter just whatever username and password you want to put in, and then click login. Right? And somehow we end up on Facebook again, right? Does that mean that we didn't do it properly? No, it doesn't actually mean that. The reason it doesn't mean that, and if you see this, you want Google Chrome to save your password, that means you did it correctly, which means that you logged in with the wrong thing, and our page redirected you to it. So we'll take a look at what's actually happening on the server. If you open up your shared folder, you will see a fbspoof.php. Open that in Notepad or Notepad++ or your favorite text editor. This is what is running on the server. So the first thing we do is get pname, right? So that's like what we did in Python to get our queue. We're going to get pname, and that's our name. And we're going to get email, which is our username, and pass, which is our password, and a bunch of other information, like our IP. We're going to change the HTTP header, right? So remember, we learned about HTTP error codes and response codes before. We're going to give it, 302, which is a redirect. So we're going to say, OK, redirect to this page on Facebook. So the end user is going to see that. This code will record the username and email, and then it's going to redirect that user onto the regular Facebook so he is none the wiser, right? Once you've done that, put your hand up if you've entered your username and password and that has worked. I'm seeing 1, 2, OK, a lot of you. Who's still having trouble?
When I log in, this comes up.
OK, that's fine. Yeah, so in my case, it showed my account just because I was already logged in on Chrome. If you're not already logged in, you'll just see another login screen. That's perfectly fine. That means it worked. I'm going to go ahead now and go to the server that we were sending it to, right? So if we take a look back at here, it's this billy.scienceontheweb.net, and it's this PHP file that we're sending it to. That PHP file is like our Python for handling queue, right? And it's going to stick this into a big database file. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to that server and take a look at what you've all entered. OK. So that is in the gen folder, right? So this is my remote folder. And we want to look at at fish.txt. So that's where it's saving it. And we see everyone's information, right? Do you guys see the username and password that you entered here? Right? I'll add that to the shared folder at lunch so you can take a look at it in more depth. Right? So you guys can see how it looks like we entered our information into Facebook. It sent us to Facebook afterwards, but by sending it first to this server, we were able to capture the username and password, and we could then use that for whatever we wanted. Right? I had you guys do these yesterday because I don't want you actually using this on people. I'm having us do this so that you know how it can be done and how you can protect against it, right? But we can see that it worked for almost everyone in the class. Anyone not see your information there? OK, yeah, it's a bit hard to see. I'll add it to the shared folder at lunch, OK? But that's phishing. Any questions? Yeah, so here's the PHP code as well, right? So you'll note that it gives us the name and the name you entered into that tag and your email, password, and it'll also store your IP and a bunch of other things. With the user's IP, you can do all kinds of nasty things to that user.